From athletic stuff like a full court pickup game, swish, to athletic-ish stuff like a half-mile stroll. Get those steps in. Head to Sierra or Sierra.com for the brands you want at the prices that let you do it all. From athletic to athletic-ish, Sierra's got it.
We're here because your heightened awareness deserves heightened entertainment. The Last Show with David Cooper.
In 1518, in the Holy Roman Empire, hundreds of people danced uncontrollably in the streets. No music, no Wi-Fi, panic in the streets. It was a dance plague. I'm serious, this happened. But these moments in history of fear, of mass psychogenic illness, they teach us things about what happens today. We are here with Lee Kunla. It is Conspiracy Corner, and we're talking dancing until your feet fall off. Lee, welcome to the show.
Hi, David. Thanks for having me. Thanks for that intro, because I was thinking to myself coming on the radio today, I feel like sometimes I need to justify my existence. Like, who is this guy? What is he doing talking about the dancing plague of 1518? I woke up last night with that kind of in my head. And here's the thing. In the social sciences, we have a problem in that we often don't get to run experiments like the other sciences get to do. You can't generally go to a country's economy and be like, we're just going to destroy your economy to see if our theory of inflation is right or not, you know?
Fair enough.
But the thing is that history is our laboratory. Because no matter what idea you have, no matter what solution or theory or whatever, there's a historical event out there which basically is your test case, where it's like, here's the thing you want to know about. It's happened before. So this is why sometimes I come on the radio with stories that are 600, 700, 800 years old, which I still think might be relevant for us today. So I hope this one is one of those.
Well, there are cases of like mass public panic that can have violence in them. I mean, a little bit more recent than the 1500s. I'm thinking like the Salem witch trials, which we'll talk. This is like a horrific mass public panic, which ended up with people being, I guess, murdered. I mean, they were put on trial, but murdered. It happens well into today. But this one, at least, is hilarious. So let's start with it.
Yeah.
It almost sounds unbelievable. It almost sounds like someone made it up.
Yeah, and it's so much of history does. Like, it's just bizarre. We are weird things. Human beings are weird. And it's just, history is great for this. So yeah, the time is 1518. The place is Strasbourg, as you say, Holy Roman Empire, today France. And it starts, as these things so often do, with one person. There's a woman, her name is Frau Trophäa, and she starts to dance sort of uncontrollably. There's no music. She's doing it outside of her place, and it's not a nice dance. It seems to be sort of like fits and spurts and almost a little like she's possessed. Now, the thing is that the best way to talk about this is really in a kind of an epidemiological model. She seems to infect other people close by, and they start dancing. So within about a couple of days, you have dozens of people dancing. Within a few weeks, you have almost half a thousand, like 400 people is roughly
They must have taken a break to eat and sleep. Like, you can't dance straight through for a week. You'll die if you don't sleep and eat.
So there are unconfirmed, of course, it's a very old story. There are unconfirmed reports of death. There are cases, I mean, people would just like collapse because, yeah, you're right. Like, they hadn't been eating. They were just constantly physically exerting themselves. They would collapse into a heap. But they did not take a break. This seemed involuntary. It did not seem fun. It seemed like something from the outside was compelling them to do this. And it just spread. And it spread to hundreds of people who all felt compelled to just kind of ferociously dance until they collapsed.
That is wild and horrific, and again, almost seems made up. What could have caused it? So,
good question. And of course, whenever we have, especially these kind of historical instances that are weird like this, there's a kind of a set types of theories that get deployed. And one, which I don't subscribe to myself, is ergot poisoning. So ergot is basically, it's a byproduct of, I think, moldy bread. So I'm not exactly sure on the biochemistry of it, but effectively it's like LSD. It's a very powerful hallucinogenic that can occur naturally somehow through the bread making process. And it's been linked to cases of this kind of like eruption of what seems like madness in large groups of people.
Okay, so the whole village this is one theory. We're not saying it's what happened, but
Yeah.
if it's true, the whole village eats bread from, I assume, the same baker. That baker's got weird mold on their bread. Everyone starts hallucinating like they're on crazy drugs.
Yeah.
They all start dancing as a result. I mean, it's plausible.
It's plausible, but those people who know more about the kind of psychopharmacology of this stuff than I do have looked into it, and it just doesn't really add up. The timelines don't add up. The poisoning shouldn't last this long. You should not be high for a week, for example. You should be high for maybe 12 hours or 18 or something. It seems to not track when people become quote unquote infected. So then there's this other idea, which I'm proposing today. Now, I do want to flag that it is a contested idea. People within experts disagree on whether this is a good solution or not, but I put it out there as an idea, which is mass psychogenic illness. And basically, it is not an organic illness. It is a social illness, if you could think of it that way. So there's no organic basis.
It's like when you're in a crowd and the crowd starts panicking and you get swept up in the panic, even though you might not believe the reason at the beginning.
That's exactly right. That's exactly. In fact, when I teach this in class, we begin by talking about mass panics and how susceptible we are to that because we are fundamentally social, right? So we're always looking to other people for cues about how safe is the environment that we're in. And then when people start giving off different types of cues, we can find ourselves in a situation where we panic even though we're not sure exactly why. I've been caught up in a couple of them. I've been in crowds where I've been running really like as if my life depended on it.
Yeah, it's why I don't like crowds. Like if you're in a crowd and someone yells, "There's monsters chasing everyone," and then everyone starts running, "There's monsters."
Right.
I feel like I'm a rational person, but I might believe it in the moment.
Of course you do, because we're designed effectively to make these kind of shortcut decisions that keep us safe. Right. Mm-hmm. What is it? My favorite Irish expression is better to be coward for a day than dead the rest of your life. And I think that's sort of how we're being created, right? It's just like take the scary option.
So people see these dancing fools. That's a great Frank Zappa song, by the way, Dancing Fool. They see them and they're like, oh, I must be swept up in this too.
Or something is happening. Like I'm sure they would have had a certain kind of worldview and ideology that made sense of this. Maybe it was demonic possession, or maybe it was some kind of spiritual ecstasy. And so this could be a means of transmission. If you get close to somebody who is possessed by a demon, maybe the evil forces are kind of latching on to you. Now, how we describe it to ourselves is maybe less relevant than the fact that we do note throughout history that there are these moments where there is a kind of a weird group dynamic that starts to take over, specifically around this kind of illness, in a sense, this kind of sense where something is happening to me and I can transmit it to you. It's almost like a social placebo, if that makes any sense.
It does.
Maybe it's not the best metaphor. I should have worked on that before.
So the dance plague of 1518, it's not the first time in human history that a lot of people started believing some whack stuff and started behaving strangely. Did you want to talk about like the Salem witch trials quickly? I think that's another example where it isn't as fun. You don't get people dancing hysterically in the street. You get people thrown into rivers and stuff. Yeah.
So of course the consequences are really tragic, and I'm sure your audience all knows about it, but what I found really interesting is that the very origin of the Salem witch trials begins with precisely this kind of psychogenic illness or mass psychogenic illness.
People dancing in the streets uncontrollably. That's what happened in Strasbourg. I think I said that right. I'm here with someone who's German, so we'll find out in a second. That's what happened in Strasbourg in 1518. It was a dance plague. I'm serious. People just started dancing spontaneously. Eventually, some collapsed in the streets. Hundreds of people. Lee Kunla is here. We're talking about mass not panic events, but mass kind of hysteria events, Lee?
Yeah, it's you're right. It's the language around it is not great, and the language is also quite off-putting if you're on the receiving end of being told, "Oh yeah, this is you're quote unquote making it up," which is often how this is interpreted. Um, I was just before we went on break, I was going to tell you about that event that happened that starts the Salem witch trials, right? Like, so this is the same thing that goes down, and we're in the Samuel Parris is his name. He's the minister for Salem, Massachusetts. It's in his house. He is taking care of a neighbor's daughter. He has daughters of his own. They're all about the same age. And this girl, she starts exhibiting some odd symptoms. So she starts having sort of like kind of convulsive fits. She also falls down laughing hysterically. Sometimes she kind of faints. There's dizziness, nausea. And they don't know what to make of this kind of very bizarre manifestations. But what starts to happen is other girls, especially in the Parris household, they start to exhibit the same symptoms. And then it starts to spread throughout the community because a lot of these people are in very close contact with each other. And then it gets out that, oh, this is happening. Maybe they are victims of witchcraft, and boom, off we go, and we're now into what becomes the Salem witch trials, where, as you say, 19 people are murdered, including 2 dogs. That's on top of the 19 people. And yeah, this is a community that tears itself apart because they believe that they have concrete evidence that they are in the midst of witches taking over their community, and they have to fight on the side of God.
And just like folks got swept up in the dancing plague, they get swept up in this. They believe what's going on. Mass panic really sets in. People die.
Yeah. And the thing is, and what's really important to come back to is the symptoms are real. Like, it's not like these people have made it up. It wasn't like the dancers colluded to create this kind of scam, or that the girls in the Salem witch trial were all organizing this and knew it was fraudulent. The symptoms are very real. They just don't seem to have an organic basis. They seem to have a kind of a social basis. And so this actually is happening like a lot. Like, there are just, once you start looking into this, there are examples all over the place. They come from factories, from schools, from the military. You take any place where you have a sufficient amount of people, and there is like some small segment where you can start noticing this happening.
So what can these panics, the dancing plague, the Salem witch trials, what can they teach us about some behaviors that we see today?
Yes, good. Make me relevant. Exactly. Like, let's bring it to today. Okay.
Well, it's got to be educational to meet our regulatory requirement for the news talk format, but just barely educational.
Okay. Well, here's my attempt. So when one of the subgenres, of course, of conspiracies is the whole vaccine conspiracies. They're just, it's one of the things that people are very sure about. There's some nefarious stuff going on. There's a lot going on with vaccines, and I'm just going to note one example of it. And I also get to plug one of the best books on this, which is by Heidi Larson. It's called Stuck. If you're interested in any of this kind of stuff, her book is just fantastic about the history of vaccine panics. So she looks at the HPV vaccine and the responses to it. So the HPV is human papillomavirus,
yeah,
which
it's a sexually transmitted disease. I think if you have it untreated or whatever, it can cause cervical cancer.
Exactly.
Yes.
And if you can get a vaccine for it, apparently the rates of that cancer drop dramatically. So a lot of states were countries were rolling this out as a kind of state vaccine program. In Colombia, in 2014, 15 girls are admitted to hospital with numbness in their limbs, dizziness, nausea, trouble walking, things like that. It starts to spread to other girls in their school. Within a couple of weeks, it's at about 500 people are being rushed to the emergency room with these weird symptoms. At first, they think maybe food poisoning, et cetera, et cetera. But eventually it comes down to it might have been a reaction to the HPV vaccine that they had received about 2 months earlier. Now, again, I'm not an epidemiologist or anything, but all evidence that I have read indicates that there is absolutely no connection to the vaccine that could be made at all. But the new element here that didn't plague Salem or the dancers is that we have the news media, which of course can spread this panic to a lot more people. So a lot of people in Colombia start turning on their afternoon news and see more and more cases of these desperate parents rushing their kids to hospital, and more that link is being made with vaccines. So this happens in Colombia, it then happens in Brazil, something similar happens in Australia, and it happens in Japan as well. Now in Japan, the outcry gets so big that the government actually steps back from their position that HPV vaccines is something that you should be getting, right? Now they didn't do it based on the science. They did it based on the public outcry and the worry that was being spread around based on these very real symptoms.
You know, I got the HPV vaccine and I didn't know this. I worry if I would have been all in my head, like, oh, maybe I'm having these symptoms because this vaccine has it. It's
Right?
funny how susceptible we are to being
Exactly.
swept up like this.
Exactly, right? And then maybe those symptoms that you get are then very real symptoms, and now you start to get scared, right?
It's called the nocebo effect. It's when you think something will have a negative effect, you start to feel like it does, even though it's like the negative placebo effect.
Yeah.
It's wild, and it's not dissimilar in structure to the dance plague that we were just talking about. But the problem is social media, news, like some village. I mean, maybe like that. I'm just speculating here. It's probably not true, but maybe that batch of vaccine for that small city, for whatever reason, was stale and they got sick, and it was real. But then everybody else hears it, and they start believing it's true for them too.
Yeah. And that's what I'm starting to think about. And this is how I'm using it in my pedagogy in the classroom and in the podcast as well, is that a lot of this stuff works, or we get swept up in it because we just can't come up with any other reasonable explanation. Right? I didn't know anything about mass psychogenic illness. So I'm like, well, okay, 500 people go to hospital. There's got to be a reason for that.
You know, when we think of the 1500s and people dancing spontaneously in the streets, we think, oh, we're so much smarter than them now. But it's kind of not true. We haven't evolved to have bigger brains than them. We're just as smart as them. We just have more technology and more, literature, and more, our fields like math and science are more developed. But we're just as, like, our logic and our reasoning, they were people just like us. So I think that's a bit of a trap to look at the past and say, oh, they were idiots then. It would never happen to us now because we're smarter, because it does happen to us now.
Yeah, I'm nodding my head very vociferously. I even have it in my notes. We are much more like our ancestors than we think. You're absolutely right. And I think often these kinds of stories make us feel superior. Haha, we don't dance in the street like those idiots did. And yet we do, right? The same dynamics are all around us all the time. And that's why sometimes I find going backwards tells us more than looking at the present.
We couldn't get the rights for Lady Gaga's song Just Dance, mostly because I didn't try. But just imagine as we go to commercial break here, that's what's playing. Lee Kunla, do check out his podcast. It's called The Uncover Up Conspiracy Cast. It is definitely worth listening to. Lee, it has been a joy having you on the show. You want to go for a quick dance later?
Yeah, let's go dance out to the music.
Let's dance to the music. All right, Dr. Lee Kunla. Oh, he's also a professor of political science at Humber Polytechnic. Look, I'm giving all your credentials. We better go to break. Lee, thank you again.
Thank you, David.
This time of year, everyone talks about going dry. But at Athletic Brewing Company, we're skipping that because we prefer going athletic, which isn't dry at all. From crisp Goldens to hoppy IPAs and limited releases in between, you'll find something that fits your style. Every single non-alcoholic brew is packed with flavor and the same craft experience you love. So yeah, you could call it dry, but there's really nothing dry about it. Find your new favorite near beer at athleticbrewing.com. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times.